Okay, let's jump right in. Right now, as we speak, picture this. There's a quiet, incredibly methodical military movement happening in southern Lebanon. It's not necessarily the kind of dramatic, full-scale invasion making the front page of every single newspaper every day, but piece by piece, Israeli forces are taking up positions inside Lebanese territory. We're talking villages, hilltops, strategic crossroads, and almost nobody is really talking about the exact mechanics of what's actually happening on the ground right now. But let me tell you, the implications here are absolutely massive. Which brings us to the big central question, the one top geopolitical analysts are kind of whispering about behind closed doors right now. Are we just watching standard border security, or is this the foundation for something much, much bigger? You won't get this from the daily headlines, but the land Israel is currently occupying, it isn't just some random tactical choice. It's a highly deliberate move. And to really grasp the geopolitics of the Middle East, we have to look way past those breaking news alerts. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sheer scale of the land we're talking about. We are talking about almost 10% of Lebanon's entire territory. 10%. But it's not just any random 10%. That specific slice happens to contain some of the most strategically valuable land in the entire Middle East. So why is Israel trying to hold on to this exact southern portion? Well, the answer involves a pretty complex web of water, geography, history, and a military calculation that spans literally more than 75 years. So let's peel the onion a bit and break this down. Layer 1, the high ground advantage. If you want to understand the military doctrine here, you absolutely have to start by looking at the map. In the Middle East, geography is destiny. Lebanon is a remarkably tiny country. To put it in perspective, it's roughly the physical size of the U.S. state of Connecticut. But don't let that small footprint fool you, because it's sandwiched crucially right between Syria to the north and east, Israel to the south, and the Mediterranean Sea to the west. That specific location makes it one of the absolute most vital geopolitical pivot points on the globe. Military strategists have a very simple name for southern Lebanon: the high ground. Basically, it's a series of elevated ridges and hills that look directly down into northern Israel. And for the civilians living down below, that tactical reality is frankly terrifying. When your adversary controls those ridges, they can see deep into your territory. They can fire rockets, missiles, and artillery from up there with almost zero warning time for the people below. For military planners, this is viewed as an existential geographic problem. Okay, moving on to layer 2. Decades of historical trauma and a repeating cycle. To look at this completely objectively, we have to acknowledge that this current movement isn't just happening out of nowhere. There is a deeply ingrained repeating cycle here that totally drives the decisions defense planners are making today. Let's walk through it. Back in 1978, Israel launched Operation Litany to push out militant groups. Then, by 1982, that escalated into a full-blown occupation of southern Lebanon. And get this, that occupation lasted for 18 straight years. 18 years of just grinding guerrilla warfare in those exact hills. Finally, in May of 2000, Prime Minister Ehud Barak ordered a complete military withdrawal, really hoping diplomacy could replace the military option. But then, of course, that was followed by another devastating war in 2006. So, for Israeli strategists, the brutal, hard-learned lesson from the last 50 years is simply this: when you leave, your enemy fills the space. Right after that military withdrawal in 2000, Hezbollah, the Iran-backed militant group, moved deeply into that exact geographic vacuum. They built extensive tunnel networks, they stockpiled weapons, and they became so deeply embedded into the local civilian populations that trying to separate the military apparatus from the civilian infrastructure became, well, an almost impossible entanglement. So the crucial point is layer 3, military mass and the logic of distance. You might be wondering, why hold this specific 10%? Why not stop sooner or, push even further north? Well, the answer comes down to the cold, hard logic of distance. 20 to 25 kilometers. That is the approximate maximum travel range of Hezbollah's massive arsenal of short-range rockets. It's a highly specific mathematical variable, and it completely dictates the physical depth of the buffer zone that defense planners feel they absolutely need to establish to ensure safety. Because, think about it, the distance between the Lebanese border and major dangerously close Israeli cities like Haifa, Nahariya, and Kiryat Shmona is terrifyingly small. By taking control of that 20 to 25-kilometer strip of southern Lebanese territory, you effectively push the launch zone for those short-range weapons physically away from the cities. You back Hezbollah into a strategic corner. They either have to use much longer range, super expensive weapons, or they have to reposition further north where Israeli air power and surveillance can track and intercept them way more easily. In military speak, this concept is called a geographic firewall. It's a literal physical territorial buffer zone that's deemed absolutely necessary by defense planners to shield civilian centers from short-range missile fire. When you look at that 10% strip of land through this specific lens, it's not really just about taking territory. To the military planners, it's a literal, tangible shield.
All right, let's peel back another one. Layer 4, the Litani water factor, the hidden resource.
Now, this is the hidden resource. This is the layer that gets almost completely ignored by mainstream headline reporting, but let me tell you, it is fiercely debated in think tanks and government ministries all over the world. We are talking about the intense 21st century competition for fresh water in the Middle East. Running right through southern Lebanon is the Litani River. It is one of the largest and most critical freshwater sources in the entire Levant region. And a lot of observers and diplomats suspect that while the official stated reason for this military presence is pure security, and yes, that is a genuine motivation, having direct influence over this incredibly precious natural resource is undeniably a massive intersecting strategic calculation.
Now, you might be saying, wait, isn't Israel already famous for its water tech? And yeah, they absolutely are. They've mastered desalination plants, recycled wastewater, and that amazing drip irrigation tech used globally. But even with all of those incredible technological advances in fighting water scarcity, having direct access to, or even just military proximity to fresh, flowing river water, that remains strategically priceless advantage in a region where water is basically blue gold.
And that brings us to our final layer, Layer 5, the geopolitical state vacuum in a region of broken borders. To really grasp the full scope of this explainer, we have to pull way back to the absolute macro level and look at the anatomy of a failed state. Lebanon has, unfortunately, been completely paralyzed by decades of sectarian politics, total economic collapse, relentless foreign interference, and a national army that is critically underfunded and essentially politically frozen. What this means, practically speaking, is that when Israel looks north at southern Lebanon, they aren't facing a strong, sovereign nation that's capable of defending or policing its own borders. Instead, they're facing a profound, highly destabilizing vacuum.
So what does this all mean for us? Here's the ultimate question I want you to consider as we wrap up today's explainer. Is the world watching Israel simply secure a border, or are we watching them completely redefine where that border actually is? Because that is the massive, long-term geopolitical calculation playing out right now in real time on those ancient hills. It's a calculation about who controls the high ground, who controls the water, and ultimately who controls the buffer between survival and catastrophe. I want to leave you with this one incredibly powerful thought.
In the Middle East, vacuums do not stay empty for long. It's essentially a regional law of physics. Iran knows it, Hezbollah knows it, and Israel certainly knows it. The situation we've just mapped out in southern Lebanon isn't just some localized skirmish. We are looking at a profound geopolitical restructuring. Thank you so much for joining me to explore this incredibly complex topic. Keep your eyes on that 10%, and I'll see you in our next explainer.